This story is a work of fiction created entirely for storytelling and entertainment purposes. The characters' locations and events depicted here, including Elena Ward, Marcus Halberg, Lily Halberg, Garrett Hollins, the city of Alderwick, Harlan's all-night diner, and the warm house exist only within this narrative. Any resemblance to real individuals living or deceased or to actual events is purely coincidental. This story contains themes of grief loss, institutional conflict, and the long-term weight of small decisions. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome back to Billionaire Heart Stories, where the size of a person's fortune means nothing and the size of their heart means everything. Stay with us until the end. This one is going to stay with you. The snow started around 8, and by 9 it had swallowed the sounds of the city almost completely. No horns, no engines, just the occasional crunch of boots and the low groan of a streetcar somewhere below the pedestrian bridge in Alderwick's northern district. Elena Ward had worked since 8 that morning, her library bag pulled at her left shoulder. Her boots had soaked through 2 blocks ago. She had $17 until Friday and a broken radiator at home, and the only thing she was thinking about was the 12 minutes between her and the front door of 4 Calloway Street. She was 3/4 across the bridge when she saw the bench, not because something was happening there, because nothing was. A child sat on the iron bench at the bridge's midpoint, arms wrapped around her knees, chin tucked to her chest. Small. 7 maybe. No hat. No gloves. A thin cotton school uniform, dark blue, shaking in the wind off the river. Elena slowed. The reasons came automatically the way they always do. It's late. Someone else will come. Her parents are close by. You don't know this child. You're cold. You're tired. She looked at the girl's lips. They were turning purple. Not blue yet, that was the next step, but that first shade that means the body has already started making choices about what it can afford to keep warm. Elena stopped walking. She put her bag down. She took off her coat, the heavy wool one she'd bought secondhand 3 winters ago, the one with the broken top button she'd been meaning to fix since March, and crossed the last 10 feet of bridge in 4 steps. She wrapped the coat around the child. The girl's whole body went rigid, then still, then leaned in the way people lean into warmth when they've stopped trusting it. Hey, Elena crouched to eye level. What's your name? The girl looked up. Her eyes were dark and careful, and much older than her face. Lily, she said, barely a sound. Okay, I'm Elena. Can you walk with me? Lily nodded once. Elena stood up, offered her hand. Lily took its small, cold fingers locking around hers with the grip of someone who'd been waiting a long time for that to happen, and they walked off the bridge together and down Alderwick Avenue toward the lit tea window of Harlan's all-night diner at the corner of 9th. 2 blocks. 4 minutes. The whole time, Elena kept her hand around Lily's and kept moving. Inside Harlan's, it smelled like coffee and fried onions and something baking in the back. The overnight waitress, 60s, tired around the eyes, not one to ask unnecessary questions, took one look at Lily and disappeared. She came back with hot chocolate and a towel warm from the dryer without being told. Elena ordered tea she couldn't quite afford and sat across from Lily and watched the color come back into her face 1 degree at a time. 20 minutes. Lily drank. Elena watched the door. At the 22-minute mark, it opened. The man who walked in wore dark pants, a gray sweater, a plain heavy coat. He wasn't loud, and he wasn't large, but when he came through the door, the room adjusted around him, the way a room does when someone enters who is used to rooms adjusting. He scanned the diner once, left to right, 1 pass, and when his eyes reached Lily, something in his shoulders came down. There you are, he said low. Lily dropped off her chair and ran to him. Dad! He went to 1 knee on the linoleum, both knees, coat and all, and both hands went to Lily's face, pressing his palm to her cheeks, lifting her chin, checking her fingers 1 at a time. Not panicking. Precise. The movements of a man who has learned that the worst things come without announcement and that you check before you assume. Then he stood and looked at Elena. His mouth opened, then closed. He reached back to the bench behind him without looking at it and laid Lily's coat over the back he'd been holding it on his arm. Must have taken it from Lily's shoulders when Elena's back was turned and then set something on the table beside the hot chocolate. A business card face down. "How much do you want?" he asked. Elena looked at the card. "Excuse me. For your time, the coat." She didn't touch the card. "I don't help children for money." He went still. It wasn't the stillness of offense. It was the stillness of someone reaching for a mental file and finding the folder empty. He looked at her for 2 seconds, 3 long enough that the waitress across the room glanced over. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena?" He nodded once, picked up Lily, walked out. Elena stayed in the booth. She looked at the business card face down on the table. She thought about flipping it over and decided against it. The way you decide against something when you already know the answer will complicate things. She left a $5 bill for the tea, put her bag on her shoulder, and walked home through the snow without a coat. 6 blocks. She didn't notice how cold she was until she was almost there. She assumed that was the end of it. She was wrong. 3 weeks passed, and Elena's life closed back around that night. On the bridge, the way scar tissue closes. Not as if nothing had happened, but as if the body had found a way to keep going. She cataloged returns at the library. She ate lunch at her desk. She repotted the small cactus on her windowsill. She listened to her radiator's nightly complaint and woke every morning to the smell of cinnamon rising from the bakery 2 floors below. On the 4th Wednesday of November, Gerald, her supervisor, a thin man who wore the same brown cardigan every day and had opinions about the Dewey Decimal System that he would share at length if given the opportunity, stopped her in the break room doorway, holding a piece of paper at arm's length the way people hold things that don't make sense. "We received a donation," he said. "Friends of the library drive." "No." He handed her the paper, a cashier's check. $40,000. No name on the remitter line. With it, a note card in clean, even handwriting for places that keep a city warm. Elena read it twice, handed it back, went to her desk, said nothing she was thinking. 2 weeks later, the landlord called every tenant at 4 Callaway to announce the heating system was being replaced in full. A private benefactor. No name. Done by Friday. 3 weeks after that, a scholarship fund 5 full-ride awards for Northern District children, anonymous, administered through the city's education office, appeared in the community newsletter Elena picked up at the library counter and almost recycled. She noticed these things the way you notice a sound that might be the house settling or might be something else. Present. Unexplained. She filed them and kept moving. She was walking home on a Tuesday evening in early December when she first saw the car. Black SUV. Far side of Alderwick Avenue. Dark windows. Engine off. She registered it and kept walking. Thursday it was back. Different plates, same make and color. Friday gone. She told herself she'd constructed the pattern. Monday it was there again. She kept walking. That night, lying awake above the bakery, she put the pieces in order, the way she put books in order, methodical without forcing the logic. $40,000. A note card in a handwriting she'd seen once before. A heating system in her building. Scholarships for children 2 blocks from the bridge. A black SUV watching the library 3 times in 10 days. She thought about a business card she'd left face down on a table at Harlan's. She put the books back on the shelf and went to sleep. But she left the spine facing out. It was a returned book that brought it. Or technically the magazine stacked on top of the book. Elena was working the returns cart on a Wednesday afternoon in January when she pulled what she assumed was a misplaced periodical and got instead a glossy, quarterly, heavy stock-dense columns, the kind that circulates in the lobbies of firms that use words like acquisition and adjacent without explaining them. The cover was dark, charcoal and gray. A man in a suit jacket photographed from below against a steel gray skyline. Arms at his sides, face deliberately professionally blank. The headline, Marcus Halberg, the youngest billionaire you've never heard of. Elena looked at the photograph for 3 seconds before she moved. She took the cart to the break room. She sat down. She read. Marcus Hallberg, 38, founder and managing partner of Hallberg Capital Private Equity Distressed Real Estate, Community Adjacent Development, Manhattan, Chicago, London. Net worth estimated at $4.1 billion, conservative by most accounts. Known for a near-total press blackout since the death of his wife Catherine, 3 years prior. Leukemia, 14 months from diagnosis. She had left behind, among other things, a 7-year-old daughter named Lily. The article called him famously private. Rarely photographed, rarely quoted. A foundation that gave substantially and never publicly. No galas, no benefit dinners, no press releases. Elena set the magazine down. She sat in the break room for 11 minutes. Around her, the library kept doing what libraries do, a cart wheeling past in the hall, a phone vibrating somewhere, the ventilation clicking on. She did the arithmetic she'd been refusing to do for 2 months. $40,000 for places that keep a city warm, a heating system in her building, a scholarship fund on her block, a car outside her workplace 3 times. I'll remember. She set the magazine face down and went back to her desk. She did not mention it to Gerald. She was very good at processing things quietly, and continuing to function had been for most of her adult life. That evening, walking home, she found the envelope, tucked under the wiper blade of a car parked on Calloway Street. Not her car, she didn't have one, but the car was on her block, and her name was on the front. Elena. 1 word, the same handwriting as the note card. She opened it on the sidewalk in the January cold. Inside, 1 business card. Same design as the one she'd left face down at Harlan's. This one was face up. Marcus Hallberg. Hallberg Capital. A phone number, a private email, no note. She stood on the sidewalk, a long moment, card in her hand, a street lamp throwing her shadow down Calloway Street, the city moving past at the end of the block. Then she put the card in her coat pocket, went upstairs, made dinner, and did not sleep well for the first time in months. This story is a work of fiction created entirely for storytelling and entertainment purposes. The characters, locations, and events depicted here, including Elena Ward, Marcus Hallberg, Lily Hallberg, Garrett Hollins, the city of Alderwick, Harlan's all-night diner, and the Warm House exist only within this narrative. Any resemblance to real individuals living or deceased or to actual events is purely coincidental. This story contains themes of grief loss, institutional conflict, and the long-term weight of small decisions. Viewer discretion is advised. By March, Elena had decided she wasn't going to do anything about it. The card lived in the inside pocket of her library bag. She hadn't called, hadn't emailed. She carried the knowledge of who Marcus Hallberg was, the way you carry a thing you haven't yet decided what to do with, aware of it, not acted on, getting on with the day. The black SUV hadn't appeared since January. The donations had stopped. Life had returned to its ordinary shape, and on the days that required it, she told herself the whole thing was over, that she had been a variable in a wealthy man's expression of guilt, and he had resolved it and moved on. She was mostly right. On a Wednesday evening in the 3rd week of May, she walked out of the library at 6 into air still cool, but carrying the first real suggestion of warmth. She turned left on Alderwick Avenue. The black car was across the street, engine running. The driver's window rolled down. Marcus Hallberg leaned out forearm on the door, entirely composed, as if the appointment had been on the calendar the whole time. "Good evening, Elena." She looked at him for a moment. "How long have you been waiting?" "Not long." She crossed the street, 4 feet from the car. "The heating system, the library donation, the scholarship fund. Was it you?" "Yes." And she'd known it since January. Hearing him say it moved it from suspicion into fact, which meant she had to decide what to do with it. "You could have just said thank you," she said. "I did." A pause. "In the way I know how." She leaned against the lamppost behind her. "And the car 3 times. Something crossed his face. Not quite discomfort, but the expression of a man who knows he's about to be asked to account for something he can't fully defend. "My security director ran a standard check. The drive-bys were my idea. He told me they were unnecessary." A beat. "He was right." She looked at him. You could have just left it at thank you. I know. The city moved around them, a bus grinding North Pigeons at the library steps, someone calling from a second-floor window. Elena looked at her hands on the lamppost, then back at Marcus. Why was Lily alone on the bridge? She asked. His chin dropped a fraction. His hands on the door went still. She wasn't abandoned, he said. Elena waited. I asked her to sit there. The sentence landed and stayed. A bus ground past. A light changed down the block. A woman walked past them on the sidewalk, talking into her phone. And the whole ordinary world kept doing what it does, while Marcus Hallberg sat in his car window with the admission between them like something set down that neither of them could pick back up. Elena did not speak. She needed the rest of it. And if you've ever been the person people kept walking past, if you know what that particular invisibility costs, drop a 1 in the comments. Because what Marcus did with his daughter next is what this whole story turns on. He looked out the windshield, and he told her. After Catherine died, Marcus Hallberg had started to believe something. It didn't arrive as a decision. Grief doesn't announce itself that way. It came in slow and took up residence the way cold takes up residence in a building where the heat has been off too long, until one day he looked at his assumptions and found them changed. What he believed in the 3rd year after Catherine's death was that human kindness was mostly performance, that people were decent when observed and indifferent when they weren't, that the world was built on self-preservation dressed up as community, and that the sooner his daughter understood this, the less it would cost her when she discovered it on her own. So he designed what he called to himself a calibration exercise. He chose a busy pedestrian walkway in Alderwick's Northern District midday foot traffic, public but not so crowded that the numbers would be meaningless. He positioned 2 security men in plain clothes 40 feet back. He told Lily she was sitting on a bench while he ran a short errand and that he'd return within the hour. He told her nothing else. He went to his car 2 blocks away and watched the feed from his phone. For 67 minutes, 412 people walked past his daughter. Not one stopped. Some slowed. 2 or 3 genuinely held their gaze a half-second too long. The kind of look that means the conscience registered something and kept walking. One woman glanced back over her shoulder. Didn't stop. Marcus watched all of it. He had timestamps, a file building on his laptop. He collected her at the end of the hour. Lily had sat with her hands in her lap and her face turned toward the river. She hadn't cried. She hadn't looked frightened. She'd looked patient in the way children look patient when they've decided that patience is all there is. He didn't tell her what the exercise was for. He told himself he would when she was old enough. He ran the exercise twice more over the following weeks. Same result. Then came November. He'd planned one final run. It was supposed to be midday again, the same controlled conditions, but he'd been delayed in the city. And by the time he arrived in Alderwick, it was past 8 in the evening, and the snow had started an hour, earlier temperatures dropping sharply. He checked the feed. His security lead confirmed Lily was monitored warm enough fine. He told himself he'd end it in 10 minutes. He didn't. He sat in his car, watching the bridge walkway, far fewer people now late evening, the snow coming down, and watched them pass. One after another, heads down, moving fast against the cold. Then a woman slowed. She stopped. She crossed to the bench and crouched down, and then she pulled off her own coat, not opened it, not offered it halfway, but removed it entirely from her own body and wrapped it around his daughter. And in the video feed, the timestamp read 67 minutes of his previous session. 412 people, not one. And here, on a snowy bridge at 9 at night, this one. Marcus shut off his phone and sat in the dark for a long time. He told Elena all of this standing at the car window on Alderwick Avenue in May. He told it plainly without the smooth management of a man practiced at narrative control. Just the sequence of events. What he'd done, what he'd seen, what it had cost him to see it. When he finished, she was quiet. "You didn't need data," she said. "You needed someone to prove you wrong. And you used your daughter to do it." His jaw moved, but he didn't speak. "She didn't know she was safe," Elena said. "You knew. She didn't." I know what you had." She didn't. He looked at his hands on the door. He didn't argue. He knew she was right. He'd known it since November, since the look on Lily's face when the coat went around her. Not surprise. Something older than surprise. The relief of a child who had started to believe that nobody was coming. "What did you learn?" Elena asked. He looked up. "That I was wrong." "About what?" "All of it." A pause. "The world isn't completely cold." He held her gaze. "And Lily deserves to grow up around people like you." Elena pushed off the lamppost. She held his gaze for a moment, steady, unyielding, not softening, not hardening, just looking at him, the way you look at something you're trying to decide if it can be trusted. Then, "Good night, Marcus." She walked home. He stayed at the car window until the library's lights went off. Then he drove. That night, Elena ran a bath and sat in it until the water went cold. She stared at the grout lines between the tiles. She thought about a child sitting with her hands in her lap on a bench in the cold looking patient. She thought about 412 people who were tired and busy and cold and had their own reasons, and she found, when she turned the thought over in her hands, that she didn't blame them. She'd almost been one of them. She lay in the cold water a little longer. Then she got out, dried off, and went to bed. She didn't call the number on the card that night, but she'd stopped filing the thought away. 6 months passed. No cars, no envelopes, no anonymous deliveries. Marcus Halberg returned to his Manhattan office and his $4 billion operational life, and Elena worked her shifts at the library and went home and repotted things and kept the card in her library bag and did not call. In October, a planning notice appeared on the community board at the library, the kind of document most people look at for 3 seconds and then look away from announcing a public meeting about a proposed development in the Northern District. The address, Alderwick and 9th, 2 blocks from the bridge. Elena was a librarian. She cared about community development. She went. The meeting was in the high school gymnasium. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs, waxed floors. The smell of decades of Friday night basketball. 30-odd residents, a city planner, an architect with a roll of drawings. Elena sat in the middle section. She scanned the room the way she always scanned rooms. Back right corner, 1 row from the wall, a man in a gray sweater, arms crossed, not holding anything, not presenting, just watching the room the way someone watches a thing they built but haven't decided to claim yet. He saw her the moment she saw him. The architect unrolled his plans. A single-story brick building, practical, designed for daily use rather than occasion. Library wing art rooms, community kitchen, winter shelter. No branding anywhere on the exterior drawings. No names. A gift to the district from an anonymous donor. After the meeting, she was outside pulling on her coat when she heard footsteps behind her. "Didn't figure you'd be here," Marcus said. "I'm a librarian. You're building a library wing." "Fair point." They crossed the empty parking lot together, neither walking toward the same destination, both apparently still in the conversation. 4 cars left in the lot. His was the black one. Hers didn't exist. "Why no name on the building?" she asked. He thought a moment. "Nobody goes to a building because of whose name is on it." She glanced at him. "You could call it something," she said. "I know. I haven't got there yet." A pause. "Would you run it?" he asked. She stopped walking. "No." "Okay." "No," she said again, and then stopped herself, because the thing she wanted to say was going to require more words than she wanted to give it. So she just said, "You can't just ask people like that." "You're right." Simple. No recovery strategy attached to it. "I'm sorry." She started walking again. Got to the edge of the lot and stopped, without turning. "Why me?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he was going to give her the careful answer rather than the true one. Then, "Because when you stopped on that bridge, you didn't decide to stop. You just stopped. I've spent my life around people who calculate everything." A pause. "I'd never seen that before. A place like that needs someone who runs it the same way." She turned and walked to the street. She didn't sleep well that night, or the next. During those months between May and October, between the confession and the parking lot, Marcus had done something he hadn't done since before Catherine died. He'd walked through his Northern District properties in Alderwick on a Saturday alone, without his security director, and gone into the small businesses on Alderwick Avenue one by one. A dry cleaner, a bodega, the woman who ran alterations from a room above a nail salon. He hadn't introduced himself as Marcus Hallberg. He'd been a man walking around a neighborhood buying a coffee sitting in a plastic chair. He didn't tell Elena this in the parking lot. He didn't tell anyone, but it was there in him when he asked her a different quality to the question than calculation. He was asking because he'd stood on this block for the first time in 3 years and understood from the inside what it was missing. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, Elena was carrying a stack of Hemingways between the biography section and the periodical room when she stopped in the middle of the aisle for no external reason. She set the books on the nearest shelf, reached into her library bag, took out the card she'd been carrying for 9 months, dialed. 2 rings. Hallberg. 1 word. Yes. A silence on the line that lasted just long enough to be real. Then thank you, Elena. She hung up, picked up the Hemingways, finished her shift. In a glass office 35 minutes south, Marcus sat with his phone in his hand for a long moment after the call ended. Then he looked out the window at the city, and then he picked up his desk phone and started making the calls that would take the next 11 months to complete. This story is a work of fiction created entirely for storytelling and entertainment purposes. The characters, locations, and events depicted here, including Elena Ward, Marcus Hallberg, Lily Hallberg, Garrett Hollins, the city of Alderwick, Harlan's all-night diner, and the Warm House exist only within this narrative. Any resemblance to real individuals living or deceased or to actual events is purely coincidental. This story contains themes of grief loss, institutional conflict, and the long-term weight of small decisions. Viewer discretion is advised. 11 months to learn a job. And Elena learned it the way she'd learned everything, by starting at the beginning and moving forward, without pretending she already knew. Grant administration donor, communications staff contracts, city permit cycles, the particular intelligence of knowing which board member to call before which other board member calls you. She was good at it. Better, Marcus told her once, with his characteristic economy of praise than she probably knew. The Warm House. The name had come from the note card. Elena had mentioned it once in passing, and Marcus had looked at her like she'd solved something. And after that, it was just the name was scheduled to open the first week of November, a year to the month from the bridge. In early October, Elena attended the final planning committee approval. Procedural, mostly rubber stamp. She sat in a folding chair at the front of the conference room and listened to boxes being checked. Garrett Hollins sat 3 chairs to her left. He was in his early 50s. Gray suit jacket, open collar, no tie. He held his pen between 2 fingers and turned it end over end the whole meeting without writing anything. He had been on the city planning committee for 6 years and ran Hollins Development, a firm that had bid on 7 properties in the Northern District over the past decade and been outbid on 4 of them by Hallberg Capital. His committee credentials hung from a lanyard around his neck. He had the quality of a man with a list not of tasks, but of names. He didn't introduce himself to Elena, but his attention found her 3 times during the meeting, each time for exactly long enough to log something and move on. In the parking lot afterward, he was talking to a young man with a notebook. Elena didn't know the young man. Hollins glanced at her once a registration, not a greeting, and kept talking. She did not mention this to Marcus. Over the following 3 weeks, through the church, ladies who'd signed up for the kitchen, through the retired teacher volunteering for the library wing, through the building manager at 4 Callaway, who collected information the way some people collect bottles, she learned that Hollins had been making calls, talking to Maya Chen at the Alderwick Register's city desk, the paper's only full-time civic beat reporter, asking about Elena's appointment, her salary, the cafe meeting, the heating system at her building, the nature of her relationship with Marcus Hallberg. He wasn't building a case. A case requires evidence sufficient for accusation. He was building a cloud, accurate facts arranged to suggest a shape that he couldn't quite assert directly. The cloud didn't need to be true to be effective. It only needed to arrive before the counter-narrative. Elena sat with this for 2 days. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't spend the time processing it. She spent it deciding what she was going to do. On the evening of November 3rd, 4 days before the opening, she went back to the bridge. She stood at the midpoint at the iron bench and looked out at the river. The air was cold, not the deep cold that would lock in next week, but the first real edge of it. The street lamps threw orange rings on the snow below. 1 or 2 pedestrians crossed behind her without stopping. She thought about 412 people. She thought about one coat. And then she took out her phone and called Marcus. She told him about Hollins. She told him what she'd heard. She told him she needed to know if there was anything in the documentation that could be used against them. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There's something else." He told her about the archived footage, 67 minutes, preserved not as evidence, but because he hadn't been able to delete it. Because it was the last day Lily had sat alone like that, and the footage was the only record of the moment it had ended. He'd archived it the way you archive a thing you're not ready to let go of. It had been sitting on a company server for a year. He asked her, "Do you want me to use it?" Elena looked at the river. "Yes," she said. She went home. She slept fully and deeply for the first time in 2 weeks. November 7th arrived, the way that particular kind of November day does in the Northeast, cold bright. The light thin and cutting rather than warming the sky, a flat pail that gives nothing back. By the time Elena arrived at the warm house at 8 a.m., the church ladies had been running the kitchen for 2 hours, and the smell of coffee and fresh cornbread reached the sidewalk and stopped several people on their commutes. By 10, the courtyard was filling. Neighborhood residents who'd been coming to planning meetings for 8 months and had strong opinions about the kitchen counter height. Volunteers who'd spent 6 Saturday mornings installing shelving in the library wing. Parents with children who'd won scholarships. Social services representatives. A woman from the school district who'd processed the first 5 scholarship applications and wanted to see where they'd come from. At the back of the courtyard, standing apart with a shoulder bag and a notebook, Maya Chen, 27 years old. The Alderwick Register's only full-time civic beat reporter. She had arrived at 9:15 and had been on her phone since. That morning at 6 a.m., an email had arrived in her inbox from the communications director at Halberg Capital, a video file, 67 minutes long, and a note in plain language released with the Guardian's consent. Lily Halberg had seen the footage with her father the previous evening and agreed to its use. No conditions, no embargo. Public record. Maya had published the story at 9 a.m. By 10, it had been shared 340 times in Alderwick's Northern District Facebook group alone. Garrett Hollins arrived at 10:15. Gray suit jacket, committee lanyard. The young man with the notebook was with him again. Hollins moved through the courtyard, the way a man moves when he has already mapped the room he knew where. The microphone was near where the journalist was standing, and he took a position near the center with clear sightlines to both. Elena stood near the building entrance in her coat, not the same coat. She'd donated that one to the winter drive the previous year, but a similar one, similar weight and color. She had not chosen it deliberately. It was November. She needed a coat. Marcus stood slightly behind and to her left. He had come the way you come to something you built, not to perform it, but because you want to be there when it opens. The city councilwoman Janet Reyes opened the program. She spoke for 3 minutes, and she used the word neighbors where a lesser politician would have used the word community. She knew the difference, and so did the people in the courtyard. When she opened the floor for remarks, Hollins moved forward before she had fully gestured to the room. He was unhurried. He took the microphone like a man who had practiced this. He named the cafe meeting. He named the date. He named the fact that Elena's apartment building had had its heating system replaced at approximately $18,000 not long after the cafe meeting by a private benefactor, in a building where Elena Ward was a tenant. He named her appointment as director. He named her salary accurately to the dollar because it was in the public filing. He said he was not making an accusation. He said the public had a right to understand the nature of a relationship when it resulted in a significant public appointment. He stepped back. He folded his hands. He looked at Elena. Marcus didn't move. Elena stepped to the microphone. She looked at Hollins for 1 second. Then she turned to face the courtyard, the neighbors with their coffee cups, the volunteers in their building project sweatshirts, the children who had drifted out from the kitchen doorway. "He's right about one thing, you see," she said. "I was chosen because of a coat." She told the story. She told it in 90 seconds because that is how long it takes to tell something true. The bridge, the snow, A child in a school uniform with nobody coming. A coat removed without deliberation and wrapped around a child she had never seen. Nothing calculated, nothing strategic. It just was cold, and the child was colder. The courtyard went quiet. Maya Chen at the back wall was not writing the story Hollins had called her to write. She had stopped writing that story at 6 a.m. Elena stepped back. The coat isn't the point. This building is the point. 15 scholarship recipients so far. 3 of them are here today. The kitchen has been open since 6 a.m. The winter shelter ran for 42 families in its first 2 weeks of soft operation. If you want to audit any of that, audit it. The documents are public. A beat. I'm a librarian. I know where things are filed. Marcus stepped forward. He produced a folder and handed it to Maya Chen, the full 501c3 filing building deed, salary disclosures, and 11 months of board minutes. Print whatever you need, he said. Maya took it. She already had the documents. She took the folder anyway because it was now on the record that he'd handed it to her in public. Janet Reyes returned to the microphone. She named 3 scholarship recipients by first name. She described the winter shelter's capacity in hours. She thanked Elena by name and title on the record in front of everyone. Hollins tried one more line. He didn't finish it. The 3 board members who had been standing behind him, each appointed by the city, none of them Halberg Capital allies, moved back from him. Not dramatically. Just a step, each a visible separation, the kind that gets recorded whether anyone is trying to record it or not. Hollins stood at the edge of the microphone space. Maya Chen had her notebook out writing. The second journalist, another outlet, arrived 20 minutes into the event, had her phone up. The crowd had already moved on. People were talking to each other. The kitchen door had propped back open. Children were running. Hollins walked toward the gate. Nobody turned to watch him go. In the weeks that followed, he resigned from the planning committee, citing scheduling conflicts. 3 corporate sponsors increased their pledges, 2 of them in direct response to the press coverage. The bridge footage aired on a regional broadcast and was picked up nationally 3 days later. The Warm House became the most covered philanthropic opening in Alderwick's recorded history, but on November 7th, the doors opened at noon. By 1 o'clock, every chair in the kitchen was taken. The library wing had 7 people in it. The art room had 4 children at the table, and the art teacher was already out of red paint. That was what mattered. Late afternoon. The crowd had thinned to the core volunteers and a handful of neighbors who'd found no particular reason to leave. The kitchen had shifted into what the church ladies called regular service soup cornbread coffee, the same as any Tuesday. Simple and reliable and there. Lily Halberg appeared at the front entrance carrying a framed photograph with both arms, because it was too large for one. She was 8. She walked straight to the main hallway without asking anyone. I need to hang this, she announced. To no one in particular. To everyone, really. Elena found a step stool in the supply closet. Marcus appeared from the building manager's office with a hammer and a nail. Neither of them had been told. Lily had arranged this for herself. The photograph was one Marcus had commissioned in October quietly, after a volunteer coordinator mentioned in passing that a photographer friend had been at the Saturday Coat Drive and had taken some candids. He'd asked her to forward what they had. In the photograph, Elena was mid-laugh at something a volunteer had said she couldn't now remember what. She was in the act of passing a winter coat to a small boy who was grinning up at her with the pure, uncomplicated delight of receiving something warm on a cold morning. Her own coat was open. The sky behind her was pale November light. She had not known anyone was taking her picture. Lily positioned the step stool under the wall, midway down the main hallway, the one every person who entered or left would walk through, and she held the photograph up at eye level a few inches from the wall and tilted it left then right, then fractionally back, with the seriousness of someone for whom straight means something. Okay, she said. Now. Marcus tapped the nail. Lily hung the photograph. She climbed down and stood back and crossed her arms, the exact posture Marcus used when he was looking at something and deciding and studied it. She looked at it for a long time, at the coat changing hands, at Elena's face in that unguarded moment. She's the one who stopped, Lily said. Not to her father, not to Elena, just to the record. Marcus crouched beside her. Yes. Lily nodded once the way people nod when they've confirmed something they already knew. Then she turned and went back toward the kitchen, where someone had promised to teach her the rest of the cornbread recipe. She had hung the photograph herself. She had chosen the wall, the position, the moment. The bridge had been her father's decision. This was hers. Marcus stood for a moment looking at the photograph. He didn't say anything. Elena walked out the service exit into the courtyard alone. It was quiet now, a few volunteers stacking chairs, the amber of the late sun going off the brick walls, the smell of soup drifting from the propped kitchen door. She stood in the middle of the space that would next year house the winter shelter expansion. 20 beds, a warming room, a coffee station open from 10 at night until 6 in the morning through the cold months. She looked at the space. She thought about the bridge, about the reasons she'd nearly kept walking and the moment she hadn't. She thought about the 412 people on a sunny midday who'd walked past Lily, not cruel, not indifferent, not even particularly busy. Just people who hadn't yet had their moment, just people who hadn't stopped. She looked at the lit windows above her. Through the library wing glass, a boy she didn't know had fallen asleep in the reading chair with a book open on his chest. She went back inside. The soup was still hot. The cornbread was done. Someone had started a checkers game at the corner table. She sat down with the checker players and lost 2 games in a row, and the evening moved on the way evenings do when they're not trying to be anything. She was home. This story is a work of fiction created entirely for storytelling and entertainment purposes. The characters, locations, and events depicted here, including Elena Ward, Marcus Halberg, Lily Halberg, Garrett Hollins, the city of Alderwick, Harlan's all-night diner, and the warm house exist only within this narrative. Any resemblance to real individuals living or deceased or to actual events is purely coincidental. This story contains themes of grief loss, institutional conflict, and the long-term weight of small decisions. Viewer discretion is advised. 1 year later, November again. The same pale, cold light, the same quality to the air. In the days before the first real snow, something withheld, something gathering. Elena had moved her morning routine, not the library across the district, but the administrative office on the warm house's second floor down 1 flight and into the courtyard, where by 7 a.m. there was already movement. She was crossing the courtyard one evening when she found Marcus outside on the pavement, looking up at the building. He did this occasionally. She'd stopped asking what he was thinking. The windows were lit. Through the kitchen glass, the overnight crew was starting their setup. The women who ran the late service had become the kind of familiar that doesn't need a name for itself. Through the library wing, 3 people at the reading tables, one doing homework, one asleep, one deep in something thick and serious, the book held in both hands, the way people hold a book when they've forgotten they're holding it. All of this, Marcus said quietly, looking up at it, started with a coat. Elena shook her head. Through the art room window, 2 children were running from the far wall toward the door, and one of them was going to hit the corner of the supply cabinet if she didn't slow down, and Elena made a note to move the cabinet before Tuesday. No, she said. He looked at her. It started with someone stopping. He was quiet. Then he nodded. Not the strategic nod, not the assessing nod. The nod of a man absorbing something without doing anything with it except letting it be true. They stood outside a little longer. The city moved around them, indifferent and busy, full of people calculating whether stopping was worth it and mostly deciding it wasn't. That was nobody's fault. That was just what cold cities do. Elena went back inside. There were people who needed things. She had things to give. That had always been enough. Before you close this out, one question I want you to sit with. If you'd been on that bridge that night, tired, $17 left, cold already, radiator broken at home, a child on a bench you don't know in a city that isn't yours to fix, would you have stopped? Drop your answer in the comments. There's no wrong answer, but it'll tell you something. The world is full of people who mean to stop. The people who change things are the ones who do. Subscribe if this stayed with you. Share it if someone you know needs it tonight. There's a kind of wealth that never shows up on a balance sheet. It doesn't compound. It doesn't vest. You cannot inherit it, and you cannot buy it from someone who has it no matter what you put on the table. It's the wealth of a person who sees a child in the cold and doesn't pause to calculate whether stopping is worth it. It's the wealth of a person who gives from what they actually have, not the surplus, but what they actually have without requiring the act to justify itself. Marcus Halberg had more money than most people will ever see, and he spent 3 years using it to build a wall around a wound that money couldn't reach. He was not a villain. He was a man who had lost his wife and decided in the quiet logic of grief that the world was exactly as cold as his worst day in it, and that the most honest thing he could do for his daughter was to get there before she found that out herself. He ran an experiment to prove it. A woman took off a coat she needed. He was wrong. And that's the thing about the billionaire heart. It has nothing to do with how much money you have. It's the thing you do when nobody's watching, when there's no upside, when you're cold and tired, and you have $17 and there's no reason to stop except that you looked at someone and you stopped looking away. What Elena gave Lily on that bridge didn't stay on that bridge. It went into a building, into a neighborhood, into a man who had built his whole life on the premise that the world was indifferent and who had been wrong, and who finally built something with the evidence of being wrong instead of a fortress to protect himself from it. It started with one coat, one person who stopped. It always starts there. It always starts with someone stopping.